مشاهدينا مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. منذ عودة طالبان الأفغانية إلى السلطة في أغسطس 2021 شهدت باكستان تصاعدا في أعمال العنف التي ترتكبها حركة طالبان باكستان والتي تتخذ من أفغانستان ملاذا آمنا. هجوم هذا الأسبوع على مسجد في بيشاور هو الأعنف حتى الآن وينذر بالمزيد بحسب مراقبين. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا أروين راهي الباحث في برنامج فولبرايت بجامعة تكساس. أستاذ أروين مرحبا بك معنا.
You're very welcome. Good to be with you.
دعنا نبدأ بتداعيات هجوم بيشاور. حتى الآن يبدو وكأن السلطات الباكستانية ما زالت تحاول استيعاب ما حدث.
The investigation is ongoing and there have been some arrests in connection with the attack recently. And also what we know so far is that a faction of the TTP, of the Pakistani Taliban, has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the spokesperson for the TTP has denied responsibility. And also Pakistan's Interior Minister, Mr. Rana Sanaullah, he also said that the breakaway faction of the TTP was behind the attack. So this shows that there are still factions and divisions within the TTP, or they have broken away from the TTP. Now, if you recall, about 10 years ago or so, there were 30 to 40 groups within the TTP. The TTP was sort of an umbrella, and there were 30 to 40 violent and terror groups operating under the TTP. So the fact that one faction has claimed responsibility and the spokesperson has denied it, it shows that there are still factions and divisions within the TTP, which both present an opportunity and also a risk for Pakistan. An opportunity in the sense that Pakistan can exploit these divisions and factions for its own benefit, to try to encourage some factions to renounce violence and accept the peace process with Pakistan. And it's also a challenge because Pakistan may be able to negotiate an agreement with the TTP, but there might also be factions within the TTP saying that we do not accept this agreement, it's not our agreement, and we have not negotiated this agreement. And in addition, the attack also aims to project fear with the Pakistani public and also create a gulf, a divide between the Pakistani government and the Pakistani people. This is the main objective of the attack, but it can also act as a double-edged sword for the TTP, meaning that in one sense, the TTP might be able to create a gulf between Pakistan and its people. On the other hand, it can also galvanize and motivate the Pakistani society and the Pakistani government into action against the TTP. Now, whether or not they will be able to achieve their objectives is another question, but it can still galvanize Pakistan into action against the TTP.
هل تعتقد أن طالبان أفغانستان بإمكانها كبح جماح طالبان الباكستانية؟ هل يمكنها أن تتدخل الآن لتتوسط في هدنة جديدة؟
They can certainly try, but there are no guarantees that the negotiations will succeed because the TTP is not Afghanistan's problem. It's something for Pakistan to deal with, and it depends on the TTP and Pakistan how they go about it.
ماذا عن السلطات الباكستانية؟ هل يمكن أن تتعاون معها؟
Cooperation to a certain extent, yes. What the Taliban can do, the Afghan Taliban, and what they have done in the past is that they can bring the Pakistani Taliban to the negotiating table, but that's where the cooperation in this regard perhaps will end, because the Afghan Taliban cannot force the Pakistani Taliban to accept a peace agreement that they do not want to accept. So that probably will be the limit of how much the Afghan Taliban can cooperate.
ماذا عن إمكانية طردهم؟ هل يمكن أن تطرد طالبان أفغانستان طالبان الباكستانية؟
Now, driving them out is a very complicated issue, and I would like to elaborate this a little bit. So first of all, the idea that the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, can drive Pakistani Taliban out of Afghanistan is oversimplistic for the fact that the Pakistani Taliban, like the Afghan Taliban, are also battle-hardened fighters. They have fought shoulder to shoulder with the Afghan Taliban against NATO troops. And they have the same weapons as the Taliban, and they are between 10 and 20,000 people. And the Afghan Taliban strength is questionable. Do they really have the military capability to expel the Pakistani Taliban from Afghanistan. That's a very important issue. And in addition, generally and historically speaking, when Afghans provide protection to others, they do not take away the protection easily. For instance, the Taliban chose to confront the US, and they knew most probably that their government would collapse, but they still did not go down to pressure, and they did not hand over bin Laden and company to the Americans. So in this case as well. And in addition, the Taliban have just come back to power in Afghanistan less than 1.5 years ago. Right now, they have two top priorities, their unity and also consolidating their hold on power. There certainly are sympathizers for the TTP within the Afghan Taliban. If the Afghan Taliban go about taking any military action against the Pakistani Taliban, it will create divisions within the Afghan Taliban, pro-TTP and anti-TTP, and that's something that they want to do. They do not want to do. And in addition, they also want to consolidate their hold on power. And more importantly, there are also ideological links between the Afghan and Pakistani Taliban. So even though Mufti Nur Ali Masood is the leader of the Pakistani Pakistani Taliban still consider the leader of the Afghan Taliban, Hibatullah Akhundzada, as their own leader and Amir al-Mu'minin. So it's very hard for the Taliban to take any firm action against the TTP or to expel them from Afghanistan.
حتى أفهم السياق هنا، باكستان احتفلت بانتصار طالبان على أشرف غني في أفغانستان. هل انقلب السحر على الساحر؟
You can say that, but I would also like to add that those policymakers in Pakistan who make their Afghanistan policy, unfortunately, they neither learn from history nor do they listen to those Pakistanis who know Afghanistan. Now, there are a lot of people in Pakistan who have worked with Afghanistan, with Afghans for the past 40 years, and they know Afghanistan really well, like the back of their hand. But those who make their policies, they tend not to listen and they tend not to learn from history. And that's why they miscalculated that if the Afghan Taliban come to power, they would help us against the TTP, they would help us against India, and none of that is happening, and that turned out to be a big miscalculation on their part. And more importantly, one thing that we should keep in mind about Afghans is that whenever they associate themselves with foreigners, it's only because they want to achieve something themselves. They're pursuing their own interests. So for maybe a short period of time, they might associate themselves with foreigners. But as soon as the Afghans achieve their objective, they will either abandon foreigners or they will turn against them. And this has been happening for quite some centuries right now. And this is what happened between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban as well.
ماذا عن خيار العملية العسكرية؟ هل يمكن أن يحقق نجاحاً استراتيجياً بالنظر إلى التجارب السابقة؟
Given Pakistan's previous experiences, I would say that the military operation is not very encouraged. It's something that I'm not in support of, because the very fact that the Taliban have regained strength and are able to carry out such major terror attacks, and in this case the Peshawar attack that killed more than 100 people and wounded more than 200 people, is an indication that previous military operations have not achieved their long-term strategic objective. And more importantly, military operations by the Pakistan Army and also drones by the Americans have inflicted untold misery on the tribal people in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Millions were displaced over a period of 10 or so years from their homes. Right now, the number is about 50 to 70,000 people. Some have returned to their home, but a large number of Pashtuns were displaced from their homes, and thousands have disappeared in forced disappearances that some blame on the Pakistan Army. About 5 to 10,000 people, still, their family members, their loved ones, they do not know what happened to them, whether or not they were given proper burial. So in that regard, the people of the area are not in support of any military operation either.
ماذا عن الاستعانة بالولايات المتحدة لمحاربة طالبان باكستان؟
It's not in the interest of Islamabad, because what the Americans are probably going to do is they will come and launch some drones and kill some people here and there, and we don't even know who they are killing. In most cases, they have killed innocent people based on faulty and false intelligence. And this will create, again, an anti-Pakistan sentiment within the people, anti-government sentiment. And the Americans, they don't share any border with Pakistan. They can come, launch drones, kill people, and leave. And all the debris will fall on the government of Pakistan, and then they will have to deal with the fallout and repercussions of drones by Americans. So in the short term, even though the government of Pakistan might be tempted to ask the Americans for help, but in the long term, it's not going to help neither the people nor the government of Pakistan.
هل يمكن أن تلجأ باكستان إلى إغلاق الحدود مع أفغانستان لمعاقبة طالبان؟
So they can close the border, but the main point is that before Afghanistan used to be almost totally reliant on Pakistan for trade and for access to international markets. But over the last 20 years or so, and this is also a policy that the Taliban are following, Afghanistan has diversified its source of trade and contact with the outside world. Right now, Afghanistan trades with Iran and with also Central Asian countries such as Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. So even though Pakistan might want to close the border, it's also going to hurt people living on both sides of the border immediately, but it's not going to hurt the Taliban. And with regards to drugs and other things that the Taliban are accused of smuggling, they can still smuggle those goods, earn money, but the border closure will not really affect Taliban.
ما الحل هنا؟ ما الذي يجب أن تفعله السلطات الباكستانية على المديين القريب والبعيد؟
So short term, they can definitely go about educating their people what's happening in Pakistan and why is it happening. Because the narrative that Pakistan sold to its people was that the Afghan Taliban are the good Taliban, they're our friends, and the Pakistani Taliban are the bad Taliban, and they're supported by India, which was not true. Both the Afghan and Pakistani Taliban, like I said, they have ideological links, they have the same leader, they're like two sides of the same coin. So what they can do is they can come clean and tell the people what they actually did and what's happening and what the reality is in short term, so that people know who they're fighting actually. It's not someone coming from India or from other country. It's the people from those areas where they are committing suicide attacks. And in the long run, Pakistan, what they can do is they can basically try to de-radicalize the entire society. Since the Soviet invasion, thousands of people have been radicalized with the idea to launch a jihad against either non-Muslims or against people who are not considered good Muslims. The society has sort of been radicalized. So in the long run, Pakistan can work on de-radicalizing its society, and in the short run, it can educate its people what they're dealing with and how they can handle the fallout from whatever they've done over the last several years.
وهل تعتقد أن الجيش والحكومة سيقدمان على هكذا خطوة؟
Well, right now, I don't even think that. When it comes to fighting terrorism, the Pakistan army takes the lead. The civilian government really doesn't have much say in that regard. And then the civilian government right now is also faced with an economic crisis, which I think they think is more important than dealing with terrorism. Right now, Pakistan's foreign reserves are going to run out in the next few weeks if they don't get any loans from either IMF or China or Saudi Arabia or some other country. So that's the focus for the civilian government of Pakistan right now. Fighting terror and terrorism is something that the Pakistan army can deal with, but the civilian government is more interested in controlling the economy and in preventing an economic collapse.
أستاذ أروين راهي، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.